So I'll just start by introducing myself, and I'm going to turn it over to Father Sweeney to do the same. But my name is Greg Shapero. I am the admissions counselor here at Divine Mercy University, and I focus on the Master's in Psychology program. And I've been working in the field for a little over 6 years now within higher education and helping people figure out which program is best for them and primarily aiming for careers related to the social sciences. Um, so I came to Divine Mercy University specifically because I just really believe in the mission of the university, the integrative component of psychology with 2,000 years of church teaching. So, with that said, I'm going to also just turn it over to Father Sweeney. If you could introduce yourself as and why you're here as well.
Sure. My name is Father Callan Sweeney. I'm a 2019 graduate of the MS in Psychology program. One of the major reasons why I got involved and decided to jump into this program was because of my work as a chaplain. So I'm an Army chaplain, currently in the reserves, but then will go on active duty here in a few years. I'm just recently ordained. So I was actually going through Divine Mercy in the program while I was in seminary, and finished it while I was in seminary. So.
Oh, great. And when were you ordained?
Last June. So not even a year yet.
Oh, good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're just going to go ahead and get started now. So, we're going to be talking about, of course, Divine Mercy, the whole culture of the school and the program itself. And not only that, but we do have concentrations in the program. These are actually newer than when Father Sweeney was in the program. They're fairly new. They're about a year old, but these are just great opportunities for students to customize the program to their interest and to their goals. So we're going to be talking about that. And then also, we'll talk about the funding, the tuition, how to make this affordable for you. And this will be a tag team between Father Sweeney and I. So without further ado, let's get started. And I like to start just by talking about the mission of the school. And we focus on psychology, we focus on counseling, we really have that emphasis on the social sciences. But not only that, I was bringing up earlier why I came here, and it's really the mission. Our whole point is to integrate psychology with the Catholic Christian teaching on human dignity. It's why we exist. In fact, our curriculum was formed by members of the Dominican order. So there's even a Thomistic view of psychology in the program. And this is really bringing back to our roots of the whole psychology principle. And so with that, we also offer 3 different programs. And under the Institute for the Psychological Sciences, or also called IPS, we have the Master's in Psychology. That's what we'll be talking about today. And this one is done fully online. We also offer a PsyD in clinical psychology. That one is done fully on campus. So students are actually here in the DMV area. And then we have in the School of Counseling a Master's in Counseling program. And that one's mostly hybrid. It's a lot of the students are doing primarily their courses online, but then they do come to the campus for the residencies. But between all of them, the Master's in Psychology is completely done online and through an asynchronous format. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So continuing on, just to share with you our accreditation. Now, we are regionally accredited through the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. This is one of the 7 major accrediting bodies. And then if you look at the bottom right side where it says NC-SARA, this stands for the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. And what that means is that regardless of where you're located, your degree will be recognized as coming from an institutionally accredited university. And then on the bottom left side, you're going to see the APA, the American Psychological Association. Now, this accreditation is actually connected only with doctoral programs, but we do use the APA writing style. Our PsyD program is APA accredited, but we still use that advanced writing format in this program. So that's why I like to include this. So just to summarize, again, it's completely online. It's done through an asynchronous format. There is one residency. This might be a little bit newer than, I don't know if you had the residency when you were in the program, Father Sweeney, but this is just an opportunity for students to connect at the 7th week to, they do it over Zoom, they do it with their professors, and it's a good way for them to better understand each other, better connect, but also to tie in an understanding of the philosophical and theological components of the program as well. So with that said, I will continue on. Now, in this, as I mentioned, we do have different concentrations, and this program does have 11 courses that you'd be taking. And now within those 11, there are 3 electives that you'll get to choose. And these are 3 of the concentrations. We have 2 more, which I'll cover. But as you're seeing in front of you, we have marriage and family studies, we have pre-PhD, and we have leadership psychology. If you're looking at marriage and family, I know that we have people that are signed up for this webinar because many of you do work in ministry. And marriage and family studies has been very useful for those that might be working with the Diocesan Office of Marriage and Families. Maybe you're a parish priest and just communicating with your parishioners and being able to assist them, or maybe you're even a spiritual director. Having this background with this population is very useful for our graduates. The pre-PhD concentration, it's not a prerequisite if you were to go into a PhD, but it is very useful in that it does better prepare you for that. And you even have the option of doing a thesis so that you can be more equipped to enter into a doctoral program. And then we also have leadership psychology. And this is related to things like industrial and organizational psychology, so working in more of a business environment. But overall, it's great for those that are taking on a leadership position or are already in leadership positions, and that includes those that are leading within ministry. So, Father Sweeney, I'm actually going to turn it over to you before I continue on with the concentrations. And you're a fairly new priest, but you've got a lot of experience. Just going through the program. Now that you are a priest, how has your degree benefited you in your line of work, in your vocation on itself?
Yeah, it's immediately applicable, right? Because especially when you're a full-time minister, you're dealing with the people, right? And understanding how people cope with adversity, whether in a positive way or a negative way, immediately becomes relevant to any interpersonal interaction. That's for sure, right? And you can see oftentimes people whose lives are going well, they don't necessarily go super deep in an average conversation. Normally in the ministry context, the people that really need help is because something has gone bad. It's probably been bad for a while. So immediately, just the basic concepts of like how the healthy ways and frankly the unhealthy ways of how people deal with that kind of stress and adversity. And so a great benefit for someone in a leadership role, or basically not a licensed counselor, but someone who is counseling at whatever degree, is how can we point them in a better direction? How can we see that the ways that they're coping aren't healthy and leading to greater problems? but also offering something better, a better option. So yeah, it's immediately applicable, and certainly obviously in the context of the military, because then the stressor is sometimes a traumatic event related to combat stress and things like that. So it's really all the same thing. It's just the antes are up in certain circumstances. But that is something that's good to note, is there's nothing really different fundamentally from the extreme of people dealing with combat trauma and even everyday goings on. A lot of it's the same thing. It's just taken to another level.
That's great. That's excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad you brought up, you used the word counseling, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to carry that on in the next section of the concentrations. And I'm going to bring that back to you in just a second too. But just carrying on with the next options of concentrations that we offer. One is in human services counseling, and Father Sweeney, you did bring up that there are moments where you've had the opportunity to counsel those that have either experienced some sort of trauma and crisis, or just experiencing some sort of difficulty with mental health. I always like to just use this opportunity very quickly to share that this program is not a counseling program, not in itself. There is a master's in counseling that we do offer, and one of the biggest differences between the two, between this one and the other one, is that it's not designed to prepare you to become licensed as a counselor, at least not in the state. Sometimes countries outside of the U.S. Will actually prepare you, acknowledge this degree and allow you to sit for licensure. But a phrase I like to use is lowercase c counseling and capital C counseling. Capital C counseling would be someone that earns a counseling degree, they sit with the state board, and they obtain licensure. They become licensed professional counselors, or LPCs. Lowercase c counseling, it sounds like Father Sweeney, that's what more so of what you were referring to, where on one hand you're not an LPC, but you are able to use the information that you've gained in the program and the tools and knowledge, so that you can better work with individuals and counseling them through their sort of difficulties. Would that be a sort of a good summary as far as how you're using the word?
Certainly, yes. And we very much, it's something that's unique to a priest, but really anyone who works in the context of a parish enters the realm of pastoral counseling, right? It's a different kind of entity than, you're right, the license and the state boards. And in fact, oftentimes in my pastoral counseling, I recommend someone see a licensed counselor. They're just two different lanes, even though they do overlap in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, that's great. In fact, I imagine that now that you have this background in psychology, you do have the ability to recognize certain maybe mental health difficulties so that you can properly refer them, whether it's to a counselor or even a clinical psychologist, I imagine.
And certainly, the one of the great things about the program, but also a necessary thing for someone who's not a licensed counselor, is to just know your lane, not to unnecessarily separate things. But as a pastoral counselor, I am primarily dealing with the spiritual level, right? And that's good. And a licensed counselor in the secular sense is not going to be broaching that level at all, perhaps, or certainly as deeply. And so they can really be complementary to each other. And so very broadly speaking, the nitty gritty of anger management, for example, is not something that I would go into as a pastoral counselor. I would recommend, I would outsource that, as it were. But I would talk about, what are the spiritual roots of anger, and helping to pray and work through that. That being said, what to do with your angry in the moment, and how to manage that, I think that would be more appropriate for the licensed counselor. So that'd be an example where I would very much own counseling in a certain sense, in a certain area, but also know that someone else in another sense is going to be better equipped and to point them in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a great summary. You're right that ultimately there are two different functions between this degree and a counseling degree. Oh, so there was one last concentration I didn't highlight yet, and that's more of a bonus one, which is the self-design concentration. And what this means is that I'd highlighted four different concentrations before this one. Self-design just means that you can pull electives from all of these. You're still taking a total of 3 electives, so it doesn't change the time frame of the program. It doesn't change the cost, but it does allow you to tailor the program a little bit more in terms of what it is that you want to learn and how it's going to benefit you with your overall goals within your vocation or for your career. So with that, I'll continue on. And these are the core courses. I just like to highlight these very briefly. As you see, it's going in an order. And this is actually going to be the order of core courses. Now, depending on the concentrations you choose and the electives that you're taking, they will be sprinkled in at different parts. And it's very difficult to say where exactly they'll fall. They might fall a little bit early. They might fall more in the middle. Again, it really just depends on which concentration electives you're taking. It also depends on when you're starting your program. And by the way, we're right now still enrolling for the summer semester, and I'll share a little bit more about enrolling for that if you're still looking to start sooner than later. But these are the 8 core courses, and then again, you'll have 3 electives that you can choose from as well. And this is just an example of different reasons why people pursue this degree. And we sent this out to a lot of you who might already be working in ministry. Some of you might be consecrated religious. Some of you might be lay people. But ultimately, it's useful whether you're looking to advance in your field or you're currently in a position, whether it's a career or a vocation. It's also good for those that are just beginning to go into the job market, or if you're looking to look for a career change, more so in the direction of ministry or human services, or again, even INO psychology. There are a lot of different career opportunities, which we'll also be covering. So next is, as I mentioned, the different career opportunities that are available. For a lot of people, they do pursue this degree because either they're already working in more of a business or corporate environment, or they want to go into it. This degree does allow them to advance, but they could also begin their careers with this. And usually it's in these fields that you're seeing in front of you. So whether it's going into human resources, or being a consultant, or working within project coordinating. Again, it's very versatile. Leadership psychology is a great choice, by the way, for these types of careers. And then next we have social and mental health positions. Now, as Father Sweeney and I had highlighted earlier, you're not going to see licensed counselor on here. Again, that would be if you're looking for your LPC, I'd suggest aiming for the Master's in Counseling program instead. But you can still use your degree and practice counseling, lowercase c counseling, in many different capacities. So whether you are working within ministry, if it's your religious vocation, if you're working within the diocesan office, but also if you're working in rehabilitation environments or hospitals, or having involvement with addiction counseling. Typically, you don't need licensure for that. You can actually become certified without having a counseling degree. So there are a lot of opportunities there as well. And next, we also do have a lot of students that earn this degree that want to go more to education, or they're already working in education. This is a great way for them to climb the ladder. So whether they want to become headmasters or they want to teach psychology in a community college setting or high school setting, um, it's a great choice for that. And then we also have government and law enforcement. So whether you're working within partnering with law enforcement and having involvement with criminal profiling, or you want to work with the victims and being a victim advocate, this degree can also work in these directions. Now, lastly, because again, you might be here because you're already working in ministry or you're planning on it. These are some examples of how people have been able to use it, and we have a lot of folks that go into this program that are consecrated religious. Father Sweeney, you had mentioned that you were pursuing this when you were still in seminary, so you weren't even ordained yet, but you were preparing for that, and this has been a degree that's really benefited your vocation. So whether you are working at the parish level or if you're working with the diocese, uh, it's a great choice for this. A couple weeks ago, I'll even highlight, Father Sweeney, if there's anything you want to add to this as well. But a couple weeks ago, I did post a webinar with another graduate, and I'll reference her in a moment. But she now works with the diocese, and she's the one that's overseeing the counselors there. So, Father Sweeney, is there anything that you wanted to add, or should I continue on?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Great. Okay. So these are just a couple of examples of graduates. Father Sweeney is not the only example that we have presently, but these are two great examples because they also earned their master's in psychology here at Divine Mercy, and they've been able to use their degree in more of a ministry setting. The one on the left side, Emily Leadham, she's the one that I hosted with a few weeks ago, and she leads. I believe their office is now called the Lord Center, but it's basically the Diocesan Office of Marriage and Families, and she's the one that is overseeing the licensed counselors and clinical psychologists there within the diocese as their executive director. So she's doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, and having a background in psychology is very useful for her to better communicate and better understand how she can empower them with their work and better help the folks and even the clients and the victims in directing them to the right individual. And then on the right side, we have Ruth Dorset Hanna, and she's been a consultant, and she also has involvement with ministry, but most of her work, most of her ministry has been working within a hospital setting. So again, it could really vary whether you're working within a diocesan office or a hospital or a rehabilitation center. Um, it's a very versatile degree to have. Now, the next thing is you do have a choice as a student as far as the pacing you would like to take. It's a very flexible program. Now, if you're doing what you see at the top, which is a 16-month track, in other words, you're completing the degree in just a little over a year, then that means that on average, you're taking 2 courses per term. Now, that won't be the case for every term if you're doing that, but for most of them, that would be the case. And usually, this is just more of a pattern that I've seen with students, and it's not set in stone. But if you're taking 2 courses per term, then it might look like doing perhaps 20 to 25 hours per week. That's more of what I've actually experienced and heard from our graduates that have been active in the program. Now, the other option is doing the 26-month track, so a little over 2 years. This is still considered full-time, by the way. This means that you're taking 1 course per 8-week term. Usually when students are doing this, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Father Sweeney, to share a little bit more about your experience. My experience when each time I speak with our graduates and our active students, they're usually committing somewhere between 10 to 12 hours per week. Now, that's not the experience for every single student, and it might not be the experience for every single course either. Some courses might be more familiar to you, so you might be able to breeze through it much quicker. And then you might also get to another course, like statistics, for instance, that could be a little bit more dense. So maybe you'll need to put in a little extra time to absorb the information. Um, so with that said, Father Sweeney, I know that I had asked you earlier before we officially started this webinar, but I'd love to hear what your experience has been as far as time commitment when you were active in the program.
Yeah, so the for what it's worth, I always, as a person who's been in school for a long time, my entire life until now, I always see the estimates of how many hours per week, and no matter what school I've ever been to, I've just been like, wow, that's way more time. And then I actually do it, and I was like, I usually don't get anywhere near to the sheer volume of time. But that being said, it's not to say that there isn't a lot of work, but the nice thing that I found was each course is very clear on due dates, expectations, rubrics, and the like. So that was actually a big help to have very good time management, because most of the courses follow a roughly similar pattern in terms of a weekly discussion post and responses and readings. So once you really got used to it, it definitely flowed a lot quicker for me. I remember times where most things are due on, not everything, but it's not uncommon. Most things are due on Friday, their posts, things like that. You can do them at any time, but it is a weekly commitment. And so I remember being where it's like, well, I know I'm going to be out of town then. So I downloaded all the material and I read it all and did it on a long flight or something like that, and wrote up my discussion posts and stuff like that. So that would be a week where I wasn't working on a paper. If there's a paper, then that would go up a lot. That's going to take a lot of scanning, reading, note-taking, conceptual things. And virtually every course will have significant paper. So that definitely will bring the average up. I found it, because the courses were very clear on their expectations, it was a lot easier for me to plan what I needed to do in order to meet those expectations. In a lot of ways, I wish my seminary was that clear, because it was much more ambiguous and oftentimes guessing what the professor thought. But anyway.
That's great. So it sounds like just the way that it was formatted, you even had the ability to, well, maybe not work ahead. Maybe that was the case, but at the very least, you were able to put your thoughts together and prepare for what your responses would be in the discussion boards, or even what you were going to, even just preparing for the reading material. Is that a good way of putting it?
Definitely. I mean, there were several occasions where, there was a week of vacation that I knew was going to be planned, and I didn't have a lot of other opportunities, so I couldn't work it around school. But it was easy for me to look ahead and do the readings, respond to the questions in a forward-looking kind of way. It's very common in most of the courses that you're asked to respond to your classmates. So that would necessitate me not completely checking out for the whole week, even though I did the work on the front end. So I would definitely have to still log in. But if I've done all the work and all I'm doing is responding to my fellow classmates, that's obviously significantly less of a load than otherwise. So it made it very manageable.
That's excellent. That's great. Yeah. So again, there's a lot of flexibility in this program. As students, once you are enrolled and admitted, even a week before the class begins, you do get access to your class. You can actually begin to explore what the topics will be, what will be had in the discussion board, and even even preparing your thoughts or your responses. Sometimes students will even write out what they're going to share in their discussion boards. They put it in a Word document, and then at the point where they need to submit it, they just copy and paste it. So there's a lot of ability to work ahead as well. So one thing I'm going to highlight too, the next thing is just the cost. And I do want to first say that there are opportunities to bring the cost down. There are a couple of different ways of doing that, whether you're doing scholarships, which we have, and I'll share more about that, or if you're doing an MOU, and I'll talk about that too. But as you're seeing, there are two different tuitions connected. Now, if you're doing the 26-month track, you'll see that that one is 26,818 before any sort of tuition reduction. There's no sort of hidden fee. Books are included. There's no travel. So what you see is what it will be, provided that you're proceeding in the program continuously and not having to retake any sort of courses. Now, for the 16-month track, it is a little bit less because every time that you're taking two courses, the second course is reduced by 25%. So that's a good opportunity for you to bring the costs down if your time would permit it. And again, this is before reducing the cost through the different means that I had mentioned. And again, I'm going to share more about that too. So I'm just looking at the time. I know that time is sensitive for many of you here and also for our guest hosts. So the next thing I'll share is just the ways of how many students fund their education. You do have options. So one option, of course, is applying through FAFSA and taking out student loans. Now, financial aid, whenever it's applied to a graduate level, it is in the form of loans, but that is an option for you. It's there if you'd like to aim for that, and many of our students do that. Another option is doing a payment plan. Some of you might not be as comfortable taking out loans, or maybe you don't want to take out only loans. You want to make sure that you're balancing it out with your own funding, and you could do a little bit of both. But if you're doing a payment plan, this means that you're paying as you go. You're paying installments every term, and you can pay multiple installments or you can do one full installment. It's really up to you. And then, of course, if you wanted to seek out certain funding, whether it's your employer or, again, if you're working in ministry, speaking with your parish priest or with your diocese and seeing what opportunities there are for them to assist, we can actually find a way to match that. So we can match up to 2,000. That's another great way of bringing the cost down even further. Now, when it comes to reducing the cost, one option is doing scholarships. As a student, you can apply up to 4 of them and receive up to 2. There are 13 different scholarships. And I always say there's a scholarship for everyone. So if this is something that you're inclined to do, I'm sure that we can find something for you. And it ranges between the dollar amount and the percentage. It can be as low as 2,000 all the way up to 50%, depending on what you qualify for. But again, this is just a great way of doing it. Now, the other option, and it's an either or scenario between these two, but the other option is called the Memorandum of Understanding, or the MOU. And this is a great choice for those. And these are some examples. These are not all of the partnerships that we have, but these are examples of partnerships that we do have. So if you belong to any of these dioceses, or you have some sort of connection to an apostolate or a mission, or even any of the universities that you might see in front of you, then that might mean that you already qualify for an MOU. Now, if not, that's perfectly fine. We make MOUs weekly. We do it with individual parishes. We do it with full dioceses or archdioceses. It's just a great way to bring the cost down further for you and anyone else connected to the parish. And there's no impact to you or your priest or anyone else, whoever decides to agree on it. It's very minimal activity. It's just more of what we request, but it's not a requirement as far as what the activity is. And if you're interested in learning more about it, I'd love to speak with you one-on-one just to share about that. So this brings us to the end. And we're going to get to a Q&A in just a second. You might not have too many questions now, and if you don't, that's perfectly fine. You're always welcome to reach out to me later on when they come up. But in front of you is my contact information. So again, my name is Greg Shapero, and that's my telephone number. Feel free to screen grab this, and you're welcome to call. You can text me if that's easier for you. And then, of course, my email address is there as well. Now, I do want to highlight very quickly, too, we do have a upcoming start date, and that's going to be for our summer semester. That begins on May 18th. We're actually still enrolling for that, but the deadline is tomorrow to submit the application form. Now, that doesn't mean submitting your transcripts or anything like that. We can actually worry about that the following week, but just submitting the form, which takes about 20 minutes, tomorrow would be the deadline for that. But if you look in the blue box, there's a code. Usually the application is $55. If you put the code in, we'll waive it for you. So feel free to save that as well if you decide to apply. Now, with that said, I'm just going to open up the floor for any of you if you have any questions. There's a chat section that you're welcome to drop your question in, either for me or for Father Sweeney. There's also a Q&A section. So Father Sweeney, I'll actually ask you a quick question just to start things off. In the program, we use Canvas. This is the platform that we use for students. How was your experience using Canvas? A lot of people might be a little bit intimidated using some sort of online platform.
I found it very simple and intuitive. It's like one of those, it's not made by Apple, but Apple's big thing is trying to make things as like simplistic, as intuitive as possible. And so in that sense, it was very much in that kind of vein, right? It's not trying to load you with too much information, but you know, this is the first step going on to the next one. So I never had any trouble navigating through it. And like I said, because things like rubrics were already integrated into the system, that was actually very helpful. So I could always refer to them. And in fact, for example, the professors will grade through Canvas. And so they don't just slap a grade per se, but they're through Canvas, they look at the rubric and they give you, your category that you earned through that. So it just makes it very simple and intuitive, and for me, very helpful.
That's great. I have experience using Blackboard, and I found that to be pretty good, but just from what I've seen, Canvas has actually been far more user-friendly. So not only the way that we here at Divine Mercy set up the courses and the rubrics, as you had mentioned, but even just a very user-friendly program like Canvas has been very helpful for students, especially those that are doing online for the first time. So with that said, I don't see any questions here, but I'll ask one more. So one question that I do have is just the support that you get from the faculty. I know that's a big part. Whenever I speak with our faculty members, they mention how they really put their effort to be there for the students, to make sure that they're getting clarity with the information, and they even meet with the students each term just as a means to support them. So was that your experience, or what was your experience as you were in the program with the faculty?
They certainly were very available, right? And so while it wasn't a regular practice for us to meet one-on-one, there was no question that something like that would be available if need be. And through Canvas and through other means, there's a lot of communication about feedback on your work. And so a lot of the communication that I got was really just integrated through that. And of course, if I needed more of a direct communication, that would be fine. Oftentimes, the feedback I would get would be perfectly good. I didn't feel like I needed to have a face-to-face or Zoom conversation. One professor in particular that was very good with ample feedback. I couldn't figure out how he had the time to give me as much feedback. His feedback was almost longer than my actual work. So anyway, that was a unique circumstance in that case, but I found that consistent, availability for sure.
That's great. That's just something that I'm really proud of our faculty, because I know that they've been very good with our student body, and the students say it every time I speak with them, and the faculty, whenever I speak to them about this, they all mention how ready they are to help and ready they are to bring clarity for students and offer the assistance and support, even for prospective students that are just trying to learn a little bit more about who we are and trying to see if this is a good fit for them. They stay open to speak with those that aren't even officially enrolled here. They may not have even submitted their applications, but they're happy to provide clearer detail. So with that said, I'm going to close here, but again, questions might not be popping up right now, but if any of them do, feel free to save my contact information. I especially would love to speak with you one-on-one, learn more about what it is that you're looking for out of this degree and to see if this is a good fit. And again, we're still enrolling for the summer. Our next start date after that will be in the fall. So without further ado, I will end here. Father Sweeney, thank you so much for just taking your time out of the day and sharing a little bit more about your experience in the program.
Sure. Yeah, they're happy to do it.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you very much and have a great evening.